Hello, thanks for looking in. I thought I'd do a series, if you will, of some of the buildings I've modeled on the layout, as well as share the inspiration behind the scenes. This first episode starts off with probably the smallest building on the layout. This is Red's Java House, an iconic part of San Francisco's waterfront, and a great place to get a burger and a beer. This little diner has been on the Embarcadero for 100 years. It's a small little diner that served thousands of stevedores, longshoremen, teamsters, and warehousemen over the years. Today, it continues to serve its fare to all that come by, and many of us as we are on our way to a Giants game down at the ballpark just down the street. My model is only about 1.5 by 2 inches in size, but it is one of my favorite scenes. Early on, it didn't exist on the layout. I originally had a long icing deck there to serve all the old reefers that I had accumulated over the years. But two things caused me to change that scene. First, as I was modeling San Francisco's waterfront and had built the pier fronts for Piers 26 and 28, the ice deck just didn't fit in, especially since there was never one there in the first place. The second reason to change the scene has a much better story behind it. Years ago now, some folks had come over to view the layout. As folks were moving around the layout, I noticed a lady and gentleman looking at that particular spot of the layout. He was pointing to various things there, and she nodded her head, acknowledging his gestures. I made my way over to him, and he said to me, "You know what you're missing here?" And before he could say anything more, I said, "Yeah, Red's Java House." They both smiled, realized that I was quite aware of the missing part of the scene. The gentleman put his arm around the lady and then said, "This is Red's daughter." "Oh, wow, how very special to meet you. This is wonderful. Thanks for coming by. Now, you're going to have to come back, because as soon as all these folks leave, I'm just going to have to go to work on that part and put Red's right there." Red's daughter smiled ear to ear. Well, her smile certainly sealed the deal, and I would immediately start the demolition of the ice deck. Now, this reconstruction project would not be too simple. I had to rip up and relay 2 tracks to make room for 2 new pier fronts, Piers 30 and 32, which would take their place as Red's next-door neighbors. But building the 28-inch long set of piers was one of the best reconstruction projects that I'd done on the layout, because this little 1.5 by 2-inch iconic diner would now assume its proper place on the waterfront. As I mentioned, Red's has been around a long time. The little cafe had a front row seat in witnessing the great longshoreman strike of 1934. That's Red's, appearing up there in the right-hand corner of the picture. In May of 1934, longshoremen at every U.S. port on the West Coast would walk out, striking for better wages, but probably more importantly, for a more fair system of job selection for work on the docks. The strike would continue into July. Following what would be known as Bloody Thursday, the 5th of July, where 2 strikers were shot by police, 21 other unions would join in a general strike, which would virtually shut down San Francisco for days. Tear gas and a call for the National Guard would attempt to quell the struggle. With the Guard on the scene, negotiations would enter arbitration between the unions and the shipping interests. Indeed, you can see yet another witness to it all in the background. That is one of the towers being built for the new San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. The strike would finally end after arbitration. Years would pass, and activity at the Matson Piers would continue to be quite busy. And the iconic little diner would be as well. Look close, and you can see it just below the bow of the ship on the left. But over the ensuing years, activity on the waterfront would decline. However, as containerization would take hold and shipping would increasingly move across the bay to the port of Oakland. Then in 1984, the Matson Piers 30 and 32, would fall victim to a massive inferno. The fire would burn throughout the night. Reds, once again, would be right there, only this time its front row seat was now just way too close to the action. Its survival was definitely in question. Though her lights were still lit, no one could say if they would stay on. The following morning would reveal the final remains of the Matson Piers. With the fire department continuing to cool the remaining ashes, the only question that remained was, what about Reds? Somehow, some way, still there, still going strong, ready to witness what comes next.